George Washington was described as a terrorist. Margaret Thatcher described Nelson Mandela as a terrorist.
Were you a terrorist?
No, I was not.
Was anyone involved in
it? Saying that, I understand that because the label was then attached to me, that there was a large percentage of people who actually believed that I was. And before ever there was an IRA in my city, the British Army were shooting citizens dead. And as a result of that, they were seen as an occupying army. And many people in my city saw the British Army as terrorists.
Most people in this room, most people watching at home, would probably agree that deliberately taking the lives of innocent people to advance your cause, political, social, economic, whatever, surely is an act of terror. And surely the group you were part of, the IRA, carried out these acts of terror.
All of the groups that were involved in the conflict in the north of Ireland were involved in taking the lives of innocent people. And it was horrible, and it was terrible, and it was wrong.
Let's deal with when you were in the IRA, up until 1974. Even before you left, the IRA were killing non-combatants. The Bloody Friday bombings across Belfast, 1972, July, killed 11 people, including a Catholic mother of 7 and a Protestant teenager aged 14. How is that not an act of terror? That's not freedom fighting. That's killing innocent people who are not fighting anyone.
Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible, that events.
So why did you do it?
Well, I didn't do it. I'm not.
The organisation you were part of at the time carried it out.
I'm not from Belfast. In 1974, I was in prison. I was in Port Lisa prison in the south. And there's even a debate around, you know, was it a war? Was it a conflict?
Very much
was
so.
it a conspiracy?
Because
blah,
if it
blah.
wasn't a war, that leaves you not as legitimate soldiers.
But the reality is that there was a conflict. There was a war situation on the streets of Belfast and in the city where I lived. And as a result of that, people resorted to the bomb and the bullet. Bombs were placed. On some occasions, innocent people lost their lives in the street.
When I hear this, it does sound like this school ground argument, that they did this, so I did this.
If you want to examine the roots of the conflict and all of the participants in the conflict, then we have to have this discussion.
I want to examine the morality of killing innocent people.
Well, I would never defend the killing of innocent people.
So at the time, when the IRA were planting bombs, say in 1973, September, they planted bombs in Euston Station, King's Cross Station in London. Yeah. The IRA killed 6 civilians in a bomb attack in County Antrim, June 73. Were you saying at the time to your fellow IRA members, this is wrong, why are we doing this?
Well, I have said, and will say now, that in circumstances where innocent civilians lost their lives, whether it be on the streets of London or the streets of the north of Ireland or anywhere else, it was absolutely, totally wrong. The IRA have to hold their hands up and be accountable for that.
Help our viewers understand the mindset of someone who joins a group like the IRA and has to carry out these kind of acts or feels the need to carry out. Is it simply the case that the ends justify the means? Is that how you justify it? When you're in a group like that, and you're sitting around the table and someone says, let's put a bomb at Euston Station.
No, I think what happens...
Do you say, well, you know, it's pretty horrible what's going to happen to the people, but you know what? The ends justify the means.
When you're in that scenario, and you're effectively in a situation where there is an acceptance that a major conflict has taken place, and in the eyes of many other people, a war has taken place, many of the combatants do then become involved in actions that even now, many years on, they would be absolutely ashamed of. And you get into this vicious cycle of conflict. You will never have a conflict where innocent people don't lose their lives.
Okay,
do I justify it? Do I think it was right? No, I do not.
Did you justify it to yourself at the time?
The killing of innocent people? No.
To remain...
No, under no circumstances.
Did you ever order the killing of anyone?
Well, you see, if we get into that discussion, let me put it like this.
Let's get into it.
Well, let's get into it. If we get into that discussion, we had an occupying army in our city. I fought against the British Army.
Can I take that as a yes?
I am proud that I did so. When I was arrested in 1974, ITN had a reporter who reported my arrest. He made the claim that I had boasted that I had killed 6 members of the British Army. For me to get into this discussion with...
You never made a boast, but did you kill 6 people in the army?
But for me to get into this discussion with you now, if I was to confirm what you said, tomorrow morning that would be a boast. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do
sure
that.
it would be both. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people, well, we'll come back to the subject, because I think there's a whole issue about reconciliation, and of a very patient panel of experts waiting to come in. I want to bring in first Professor Louise Richardson, who is one of the world's leading experts on terrorism, author of the book What Terrorists Want, Understanding the Enemy, Containing the Threat. Louise, is there a definition that you use, being a terrorism expert, by which you identify terrorists or terrorist groups? Because we do have this issue. How do we tell the difference? Can we tell the difference?
Yes, we can tell the difference. Terrorists are people who deliberately target non-combatants for a political purpose. Terrorists are not, by and large, waging a war because they don't have mass support. If they had mass support, they would wage first a guerrilla army, or indeed launch a conventional army. It's precisely because they don't have mass support, they're a minority group, that they use shocking tactics, psychological tactics, tactics that are deemed the excesses of warfare, namely killing non-combatants, to have a greater effect.
And when you hear Martin talk about his own role in the IRA and having left, when he left and become a politician, what's your response to that?
Well, that's not consistent with what most academics who observe Mr. McGuinness's career in Northern Ireland, which would suggest that he certainly didn't leave in the early 1970s. I would also say, in Mr. McGuinness's defense, there's no doubt in my mind that the IRA was a terrorist organization. But over time and under his leadership, their violence did become more discriminate, did focus on killing soldiers as opposed to innocent civilians.
Now, we had a conflict. The IRA could have killed thousands of people on the streets of London if they had wanted to during the course of that conflict, and the same in the north of Ireland. And in the circumstances where innocent civilians lost their lives, it normally was on account of the IRA making a huge mistake. But yes, the reality is that innocent people lost their lives.
But not
innocent people lose their lives in every conflict.
The big challenge. But your argument that London, thousands of people died, in my head that sounds like, well, we're not Al-Qaeda, so give us a break.
No, I'm not asking anybody to give the IRA a break.
Sounds like it. You're saying either it was accidental or it could have been much worse.
No, but what I'm trying to do is to disprove the notion. Because you're working from the perspective that because some people call the IRA a terrorist organisation, the IRA strategy was to go out and deliberately kill hundreds of people.
I'm saying that's what history tells us happened on several occasions. In October 1990, you talk about mistakes and accidents, the provisional IRA in your home city of Derry forced at gunpoint a Catholic man named Patrick Gillespie, who worked as a cook at a British army base. They forced him at gunpoint. They drove their car behind his to make sure he did it. They forced him to drive his car into an army checkpoint, which blew up, killing Patrick Gillespie, 4 British soldiers, and damaging 25 nearby houses. How is that not a cold-blooded killing, a murder, plain and simple?
Well, obviously people will have their interpretation of that. What was I doing in October? What was I doing in October 1990? In October 1990 was just
Some people say you were involved in the IRA in October.
Well, let me just tell you what I was doing. I'll just tell you exactly what I was doing. Margaret Thatcher was the British Prime Minister at the time. She sent an envoy to Derry to meet with me, which we did do over a period of some 2 hours. I met with that person with the full support of the Sinn Féin leadership and also with the full support of the IRA.
But that doesn't change the fact that a few minutes ago you were telling me we didn't kill lots of people randomly. When it happened, it was accidental or unintended. I'm saying to you, you took a Catholic man, someone from your own community, your organisation, or organisation you once supported.
You're the one that keeps using the word we.
Let me be really clear then. The IRA, a group you were defending earlier, took an innocent man, made him blow himself up at a checkpoint. Bishop Edward Daly, well known in your part of the world, said at his funeral, the people who support the IRA are the complete contradiction of Christianity. That is a Catholic bishop's view on what the IRA was doing in 1990.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would defend to the death anybody's right to hold any view.
Do you agree with that view?
No, I don't agree with the view. I think that quite clearly I was involved in the very embryonic stages of trying to build a peace process.
You said in court once that you were very, very proud to be a member of the IRA. Looking back now as a former member, as someone who was involved in the peace process, now campaigning against men with guns, do you still stand by that? Were you very proud to be in it, or actually are you quite ashamed? Are you regretful?
No, I am proud that I was in the IRA. I'm proud that I fought against the British Army. I also am big enough to put my hands up and say that there were things that the IRA done were totally and absolutely wrong.
I mean, I asked Martin earlier about, you know, he's admitted that he was in the IRA and he was proud to fight against the British Army. We don't know if he actually killed anyone because he doesn't want to boast. But I'm going to ask you, you have said in the past, you're on record, I believe, as saying that you would be willing to die for the Palestinian national cause, that you feel that passionately, that you would go and die for the Palestinian
Well,
cause.
if your country is occupied by invaders, wouldn't you give your life for your country?
Or whether it's for Mr. McGuinness or the leadership of Hamas or the PLO or Al-Qaeda or whoever you want to use, these are people that want political power, and as long as they think terrorism works, they will use it.
Don't you just listen to Martin McGuinness talk about this cause and about why he signed up when you hear Azam Tamimi talk about the Palestinian cause. In your research, from your experience, in your opinion, is there a single reason? Is there a variety of reasons? Is there a common factor why people turn to armed groups such as Hamas or the IRA or
I think the most common factors are threefold. There's usually a desire for vengeance against something, whether it's the case of the notion that foreign troops are on your ground, though it's worth remembering that British troops were deployed in Northern Ireland to defend Mr. McGuinness's community and mine from an out-of-control police force. But so yes, I think the first motive is vengeance against some atrocity committed on one's own community. And in fact, terrorists are very good and very consistent at deliberately provoking governments into overreacting, and governments routinely do, which just serves to win support for the terrorist group. So the first motive is usually vengeance. The second is a desire to provoke a reaction. Terrorists, as I said, are invariably weak, so the bigger the reaction they get, the more important they appear. So they're deliberately trying to provoke a reaction. And thirdly, they're looking for glory. They're looking for renown. That because they're small and weak they wouldn't otherwise get, but they can get it by using violence.
We've talked about your role as a man of violence. In part two, we're going to take a break.
I don't consider myself as a man of violence.
Okay. But you were part of an organisation that was?
Yes.
We are going to continue this discussion.
I don't believe that I have been given immunity from prosecution. The only immunity that I received was the same immunity all of the people who were involved in the IRA in Derry, for example.
I mean, you talk about immunity. Is it because you're worried about prosecution that you don't just come out and say, look, I've got this far, I am where I am, I believe in reconciliation, here's what I did, here's the atrocities I was involved in, and I want to say sorry to the victims?
Well, I think all of us who were combatants in the conflict collectively maybe just might be able to agree that all of us should say sorry to the victims.
Okay, but you individually?
Well, I absolutely am prepared to say sorry to people whose lives that I've affected.
Have you said sorry?
The IRA apologised in the past.
Have you personally said the word sorry?
I think all of us should be prepared to say sorry, and I'm prepared to say sorry.
But you're not saying it yet?
I've just said I'm prepared to say sorry.
So is that a sorry?
We should all be sorry and regretful.
What I would like to say is that throughout my association with Martin McGuinness, and I come from a very personal position here because my 12-year-old son James was one of the 29 people butchered in Omagh by Mr. McGuinness's former colleagues in the IRA in 1998. And for me, this has been a very difficult and poignant evening, but I would like to say this, that the people for whom this audience should have the most respect are the victims and their families, who over the years have consistently and always rejected violence, despite the sufferings and the enormous personal sufferings of over 3,000 people in Northern Ireland, most of which I have to say are victims of the IRA. It is those people who have prepared to put violence behind them and to not get involved in a circle of revenge for whom we have to have most respect. But I'd like to come on to this point about Martin McGuinness. And Martin has consistently this evening, despite some very tough questioning, as he always manages to do with me, avoiding many of the important issues, which is that Martin has a means and knows of the people who are involved in the Omagh bombing and has refused consistently to get people to come forward to give evidence to the police so that these people can be convicted of their crimes. But the second thing is, I would have more respect for Martin McGuinness as he portrays himself as a person of democracy, if he completed his democratic journey and he admitted some of the crimes that he's been part of. You mentioned Patsy Gillespie. Patsy Gillespie's widow, who's still alive today, knows exactly what happened and who ordered the death of her husband. Everybody in this room would have more respect for you, Martin, if you accepted your position and you started telling the truth.
Okay.